Vernal pools are a unique type of wetland that scientists are continually learning more about. They have the benefit of having fewer types of predators than more permanent bodies of water.
They're the only wetland we have that's defined by the species that depend on them for successful breeding, and that would be in my part of New England, which is Maine, spotted salamanders, blue spotted salamanders, and wood frogs. They generally come to the same pool that they were hatched from, so they have a home where they come to breed. They can't compete with fish, and they can't compete with high populations of insects, invertebrates that would eat their eggs and their tadpoles and larvae. So because vernal pools dry down every year or every second or third year, you don't have permanent populations of fish or bullfrogs or green frogmen, so it's the only safe place that they can lay their eggs and the young can develop. So wood frogs come and breed right as soon as the ice is off the pool. They tend to put all their eggs in the same place. They breed colonially. They take 2 to 3 months to develop, and that's why they need the water for 2 to 3 months. These eggs look like they've only been laid a couple of days ago. They start out as really small masses, and then they take up a lot of water and they expand. So these are actually easier to count individually.
In eastern New England, Jim Andrews helps identify Jefferson salamander egg masses from the more common spotted salamander eggs.
This loose runny one here is a Jefferson egg mass. Looks like maybe a sedge that it's attached to, and it has widely spaced eggs, fewer of them, and it's runny, and it doesn't have as much of a protective, firm outer layer of jelly. Where this one, you can see how it holds its shape. It has this really thick layer of jelly on the outside. It's great protection from predators, but it also is a giant sponge that holds moisture. So if this pond dries up shortly, if we get a period of time without any rain and this becomes exposed, it can be exposed for a couple days and still keep these embryos alive.
And it's sort of a race against time to get out of the pool before it dries down. And sometimes the pools aren't successful. Like this pool we're looking at here sometimes dries early, and it only is successful for wood frogs 2 out of 5 years. But those 2 years that are successful produce thousands and thousands, maybe 20,000 young wood frogs that sustain the population in this forest land here. So it doesn't matter that it dries too early in some years. The more we've studied, the more we've learned that vernal pools aren't just these traditional wet circles in an upland habitat where you can easily define their border. But they can be marshes, what you consider marshes that just dry out but support the animals and they're fishless. They can be pools in forested wetlands. So vernal pools, now we understand, can be part of larger wetland complexes, but they are wet pools that maintain water for 2 or 3 months in these greater wetlands. Some of the challenges is connecting what we're now calling vernal pool habitat instead of just vernal pools. And the habitat encompasses the breeding area, the summer area, and where they need to be in the winter. And that's the challenge, is making a nice, clear route that can support an amphibian to go to all its different habitats.
Balancing these habitat needs with human development is complicated. One strategy being used is called mitigation. It allows development of some less significant wetland areas if other, more valuable wetlands are protected elsewhere.
It's hard for us to recreate nature. We don't know all of the complex interactions. There might be a lot of upland animals that are tuned to knowing where that pool is, and they're going back and feeding. So it should be a last resort. It's not to say that you can't create a successful vernal pool, because people do that. In fact, some farm ponds that have been grown in by woods have turned out to be great pools. But as a fix-it, as to say, let's not worry about our natural pools, we can just create them, it should be a last resort. These adults come back to the same pool, 98%, we call it fidelity, from which they were hatched. So if you're filling in their pool, we've had evidence of them coming back and just laying eggs on pavement. So they know where they're going. The best way to protect vernal pools is to work with the citizens and on a town level, and that's what we do a lot of. And you can train people to identify vernal pools and go out and count egg masses. School children make the best citizen scientists. You train them to identify the animals and count the egg masses, and they're much more careful than the adults. They're a perfect resource working with the town to map the vernal pool resources in a town. And then they can ask questions about linking, what's the best way to link these pools together or with public land that's already protected or to the other habitats that we know these animals need, like well-drained uplands and forested wetlands. And these routes will be used by more than just the amphibians. They'll help connect all these wetlands to all the other animals that use wetlands, like turtles and snakes and small mammals and birds and moose and deer even.